Okay, hello, our challenge seekers. So, the next few slides are an extension to day three's lesson. We just wanted to provide it for some of you that maybe were looking for something a little bit more challenging. This does incorporate our understanding of equations, which is a topic that we already covered in school. I want to say around November. You guys did really well with equations, so if you're up for a challenge, I'm sure that you will be successful with this. You just have to pay attention to details and just follow along. Okay, so if you do decide to do the extension, there is a third warm up. Congratulations if you do that, that's amazing. Because you guys have been working so hard today. In the next slide, there's a reminder of how to solve equations. So this is a very simple equation. It's a one-step equation. It says 10.5 equals 2 times x. Anytime we have an equation, we're usually looking to isolate a variable. For this example, we're looking to isolate x, which means we're trying to get it alone. So since the 2 is multiplying x, we apply the inverse operation of division. So we divide by 2 over here. And then if you notice, whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other because that's how our equation remains balanced. So on the left side, we have 10.5 divided by 2 equals 5.25. And then on the right side, we cancel out the two 2's because 2 divided by 2 equals 1. And anytime we have a variable by itself, we know that there's really a 1 in front of it, but at this point, we know that we don't have to write that 1. So our x is now isolated, and we have 5.25 equals x. Remember, you can check this if you plug it in, right? It would be 2 times 5.25, and that would give us a product of 10.5, so I know our answer is correct. All right, so we're going to keep that in the back of our mind as we explore the next few examples. So kind of similar to what we've already accomplished today, but instead of our circumference being in terms of pi, our circumference is going to be solved for us. So here they're giving us a circumference of 5.6 millimeters, and they're asking us to find the diameter. So if we look at this example, I'm going to write it on my board. So they're telling us that the circumference equals 5.6 millimeters. Okay, so I'm just going to rewrite that using C. So C equals 5.6 millimeters. So this is actually what the circumference is. So I'm going to look at my formulas. And the question was asking us to find the diameter. So we don't know what the diameter is. The only thing we know is that the C is equal to 5.6. So if I'm looking for a diameter, I'm going to use the formula that obviously has diameter in it. So we're going to write C equals pi times diameter. And since I know what the C is, I'm going to take that number and I'm going to substitute it in where I see C. So I'm going to write 5.6 equals pi times diameter. Okay? Now, just like that equation I just walked you through, we're trying to isolate D. And the operation that is happening to pi and diameter is multiplication. So the inverse operation to get the diameter isolated would be to divide by pi. So we're going to divide by pi. And if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. And let's watch what happens. So over here, like before, anytime you have something over itself, before it was 2 divided by 2, it equals 1. Pi divided by pi is going to be the same thing. It's going to be equal to 1. So we're able to cross it out because we know that a 1 in front of the diameter is the same as writing just diameter by itself, or D by itself. So we got that done. But over here, we're going to have to actually do that calculation. So I'm going to go to my calculator and do 5.6 divided by pi. So we'll do 5.6 divided by pi. And we get this lovely irrational number of 1.782 and so on. And that is going to equal our diameter. Because remember, in our equation, we canceled this out, so we're left with diameter on the right side. So it's going to be our quotient equals diameter. And in the problem, they ask us to round, well, the problem rounds to the nearest hundredths. So 8 is in my hundredths place, which is the second digit after the decimal. So we take 2, tells us to keep 8 there. So our final answer would be 1.78 millimeters is going to be our diameter. Okay, so let's go through this again because I know that's probably a little confusing. So the question told us that the circumference equals 5.6 millimeters. So we are told that C equals 5.6 millimeters. They wanted us to find the diameter. So this time we are looking for the diameter to a circle that has a circumference of 5.6. So we take 5.6, we substitute it in to C using the formula C equals pi times diameter, since diameter is what we're looking for. We now have 5.6 equals pi times diameter. My goal is to isolate D. So in order to isolate D, we do the inverse operation, which would be division, since pi is multiplying our diameter. If I divide by pi here, I must divide by pi on the other side to keep my equation balanced. Anytime you divide something over itself, it equals 1. We know that there's really a 1 in front of this diameter, but we don't have to write it. We do have to do the quotient here. We have to do 5.6 divided by pi. So you use your calculator for that. We get this irrational number of 1.782 and so on equals our diameter. In the model, it rounds to the nearest hundredth, which is what I showed you here. The hundredths place is the second digit after the decimal. We look at it, we look at the number next to it. Since it's 4 or less, we keep it. And then we have our final answer of 1.78 equals our diameter. Now, in the lesson, there is a mistake. The lesson says that the final answer is 0.78. Just be mindful it's 1.78. I put the correction for my classes to see, but if anyone else doesn't have that, the correct answer is 1.78. You'll see in the lesson it says 0.78. It was just a typo. All right. So let's do another one so that you see it again. So again, this is finding parts of the circle given a circumference solved out, like not in terms of pi anymore, actually solved. Okay, so if you go through the lesson, I gave you the co-construct steps so that you have them there as like a guide, especially when you do this without me on the video. So we'll go to the next one. Okay, so we have, again, a circle. And in our circle, they're telling us that the circumference equals 4 millimeters again. Okay, and they want us to find the diameter. Okay, so if we're looking for the diameter, I'm going to use the formula that has diameter included. So I do C equals pi times diameter. I know what C is. C is 4. So I'm going to take that value and substitute it in for C. So instead I'm going to write 4 equals pi times diameter. Okay, my goal is to get diameter isolated. So since pi is multiplying it, we do the inverse, which would be to divide. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. On our right side, we know that pi over pi will equal 1, so we can cancel it out. We know that there is a 1 in front of this diameter, but we don't need to write it because when a variable is alone, we know a 1 is there. So we got our diameter isolated, but we have to do this quotient over here. So again, I'm going to go to my calculator, and I'm going to do 4 divided by pi. And we get an answer of 1.273 and so on. And that will be equal to our diameter. We just have to round now. So in this problem, again, they are asking us to round to the hundredths place. So the hundredths place is the second digit after the decimal. We look at the digit that's next to it. Since it's 4 or less, we keep it there. So that means that my final answer is going to be 1.27 millimeters is equal to my diameter. Okay, so I'll take you through it again. So we were told that our circumference is 4 millimeters, and they wanted us to find the diameter. So we use the circumference formula, C equals pi times D, since diameter is what we were looking for. we took the 4 for circumference, we plugged it in for C. To get D, or the diameter, isolated, we wanted to inverse the operation that was happening to it, which was multiplication. So we, instead of multiplying by pi, we divided by pi. If we do that to one side, we have to do it to the other. So on our right side, the pi is canceled. That gave us 1D, or just diameter isolated by itself. We do our quotient of 4 divided by pi. We get this irrational number that goes on forever. The problem asked us to round to the nearest hundredth, so we rounded to 1.27, included our units, and that is our final diameter. Okay, so after that, there's a couple more for you guys to try it on the UDO. And then if you keep going, now it's the same idea of what we just did, but of course now they're going to ask you to find the radius. So it's not terrible. I gave you another equation example to relate to. You could do this a couple of different ways. If you guys can find the diameter, then you can also just use your relationship and split that in half, right? Because radius is half of a diameter. Or you can use the other formula, which is modeled for you in the lesson. So I'll show you that way, I'll show you the other way, and then you guys go off on your own and try a few more challenge questions for yourself, okay? Again, there's steps, there's some practice, and that's it. Okay, so I'll show you this, and then I'm going to wrap it up for today. Let's see. All right, so in this one, they're giving us that the circumference this time is equal to 1.9 millimeters. Okay, and they want us to find the radius this time. So we could do exactly what we just did in the last example. If you are comfortable with that, please stop this video now and do not watch any further, because if you can do what we did before, then just take that answer and divide it by 2, and that's going to be your radius. Okay, if you want to know how to solve this using the other formula, I'm going to model that for you now. But if you know how to do what I just showed you, then stop this video so that you don't get any further confused, and just take your answer and divide it by 2, and you will get to the same answer that we're going to see right now. Okay, so if you want to use the other formula, since now we're finding a radius, right? This formula has radius involved. We would write C equals 2 times pi times r, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to plug in C since I already know it. I'm going to plug in C right here. Okay, so instead of it being C equals 2 pi r, it's now going to be 1.9 equals 2 times pi times r. Okay, so again, my goal is to isolate r. So in order to do that, I want to inverse the operations that are happening to r, and those operations are multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division, and the numbers that are multiplying r are 2 times pi. So we are going to inverse that by doing division of 2 times pi. And again, whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So here, 2 divided by 2 will cancel out to 1. Pi divided by pi will cancel out to 1. You guys saw that already in our previous examples. Here, we would have to actually do this division. So you want to take 1.9. I'm going to show you in the calculator because I feel like a lot of students make this mistake when they try to solve this. So it's going to be 1.9. You're going to divide it, and you're going to use parentheses now because you have two things underneath that 1.9. So you're going to use parentheses 2 pi, like that. Because if you don't put the parentheses, then the calculator is going to do 1.9 divided by 2 first, then divided by pi, which is incorrect. We want to keep that 2 pi together. So you have to do 1.9 divided by parentheses 2 pi, close your parentheses. If you have a calculator that makes fractions, you could do a fraction and just put the 2 pi as the denominator. Okay, so I'm going to press enter, and we get our irrational number of 0.302 and so on. and that is going to be our radius, not rounded. They want us to round this time to the 10th place. So I look in my 10th place, it's a 3. I look next to it, it's a 0. 4 or less keeps it there, so I'm left with 0.3 units is equal to my radius. Okay, so let's go through it again. So we were given a circumference of 1.9. We were asked to find the radius. So since we were asked to find the radius this time, we decided to use the radius formula. We plugged in what C was equal to, and we rewrote it. So it was 1.9 equals 2 times pi times r. Then our goal was to get r by itself, so you do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. We divide by whatever is multiplying by r, which is 2 pi. If you do that to one side, you have to do it to the other. So on the right side, 2 divided by 2 is 1. Pi divided by pi is 1. We know that a variable by itself has a 1 in front of it. We do not need to write it. And then on this side, we have to figure out what that quotient is. So again, in your calculator, you would do 1.9 divided by parentheses 2 pi, because you want to keep that product together. If you don't do it, you won't get the right answer. If your calculator has a fraction option, then you can put this in like this and press enter. You will get the same quotient as this. Okay, so we did that. We got our quotient. We were told to round to the nearest 10th, and then we included our units, and that is our radius for this example. Okay, so again, this was an extension, guys. I really appreciate those of you that are at least attempting it. Nothing is required for you to submit to us, but it was just for anyone that was looking for a little bit more work. I know some of you are used to some more challenging stuff, so this was an opportunity we felt would be good for you to just push yourself a little bit harder with this topic, okay? Hope you have a great time. Talk to you later.